Everything that could have gone wrong did. Have you ever been so excited for a tournament that you couldn't wait to get there and couldn't wait to start playing? And once you did, it all went the wrong way. Well, that happened to me at this RCQ, and I experienced it so that you don't have to. So you're a Magic player that has played a few tournaments and lost. Maybe you've decided that this competitive Magic thing is for you, regardless of the format. I was and am where you are. So I'm going to give you the 5 lessons that I learned at my tournament. So maybe you could take them and apply them to your next tournament in the future, whether that's draft, standard, pioneer, CEDH, whatever your cup of tea is. Competitive Magic and the fundamentals of Magic are the same. Hey guys, it's Navigator. I want to give you the 5 lessons that I learned losing at my RCQ so that you can have a better chance at top 8ing this Pioneer season. Before we dive into my 5 lessons, I want to take you guys back to my mindset just before we started. So let's hear from past me on my way to the tournament. I am driving on my way up to Spellhold Games for the RCQ here in part 2 of that whiteboard series. And I just kind of wanted to talk about my thoughts going into the event, kind of things I did this last week to get ready, and I guess talk about the feelings more, the mindset, because one of the biggest things about going to an RCQ or going to any competitive event, something where you're going to be testing yourself relative to others and the ultimate outcome is unknown. A lot of mindset goes into it. So first, let's talk about the prep throughout the week. So as kind of expected, I didn't have a ton of time to play Paper Pioneer. So I, played on Arena. Having a Mac, I don't really have MTGO, plus I don't like the MTGO UI. I know that the right answer is to test competitive Magic, you should be playing MTGO. But I also believe in the power of the people, so if more of us play Arena than anything else, that forces Wizards to put more emphasis onto Arena. Plus, Pioneer is going to be on Arena by the end of the year anyway, allegedly. So all of the cards I'm playing in my Amalia deck are actually currently legal and coded for Explorer. And Explorer is a rough representation of the Pioneer metagame. We're missing some staples like Treasure Cruise. So like the decks that you face aren't 100% identical. The bigger thing is the quality of competition isn't necessarily the same, at least in Explorer on Arena, than in Paper Pioneer. But I built the Amalia deck with my sideboard tech, best of 3, and I went platinum to mythic relatively quickly in the amount of time I was able to play. And that had me feeling so-so. Reason being, last season for Murders at Karlov Manor, I signed up for a sealed RCQ, and I practiced sealed on Arena. I trophied multiple times on Arena, and I went to the RCQ and I went 0-3. So all that to say, take the Arena's results with a grain of salt. I think what it added value to
is stuff within your domain of control, right? You can't control how competitive your opponents are, how tough the matchups are with the decks that you face, but you can get a good idea of how to situationally use cards in your deck. So how to implement the sideboard, what are your lines to win? So I think, going to the second question of trying to answer what it is that I'm going to play, what am I comfortable with? um, Playing on Arena, I would say does count for you getting reps and sets in with the deck. Because it shows you, or it forces you into positions to think where you do have an opponent that's pressuring your life total, trying to win the game with their own strategy. What do you do to advance your game state? So because of that, I think Arena was valuable. Next up, I played some Spell Table as a part of a couple Discord servers, playing the Amalia combo. And I'd say the biggest thing I learned there was against the Niv Mizzet matchup. Um, I learned some threats that I wasn't tracking before, namely Unmoored Ego, which is more or less a Necromentia that they can get to their hand by casting Niv Mizzet Reborn. Niv Mizzet is a through and through like tools style control deck, very similar to Fires. Um, and my opponent played it well. Uh, I think I still won the match, but it was a grind. They necromented my wild growth walkers, so they took out part of my combo. I had to learn how to grind Amalia to 20 power, um, just through coincidental life gain triggers. So stacking my deck, playing multiple creatures. Um, that was part of the path to success. I would say the other part I learned was Voice of Resurgence. Um, it helps me win on the stack, where I'll have a Voice of Resurgence out, cast the last part of my combo. I'm about to combo off. Then they cast a removal spell. I think in this case it was Vanishing Verse, targeting I believe Wild Growth Walker or my life gainers. But that triggered Voice of Resurgence, and which put a new life gain trigger on the stack and allowed the combo to happen before their removal happened. I think Aetherflux Reservoir is a critical main board. And what I did in that situation after they Vanishing Versed and then Unmoored Egoed all my Wild Growth Walkers, or they got rid of Amalia. They put me in some situation where the combo alone wasn't enough to win. Having my Aetherflux Reservoir in the main board allowed an alternate win condition where my life total was beefed up enough that I could just play it and it's tapped out, and win against the opponent. Then last night, JJ and I had a grind session for about 4 hours. And we ran my deck through the gauntlet. And I'll do a video when I get back home on what that gauntlet looked like and what I would change next time. But while we were running the gauntlet, I learned we made an interesting tech decision against the Mirror Mash, and that's the inclusion of Ashiok. So I'm excited to see how that plays out for me. And that's it for me right now.
As you could see, I was confident going in, and that's something that you need to be in. Now, this video is part 2 of my first White Series video. So if you haven't seen the first video, I'm going to link it right up here, where we talk about the deck selection process, deck teching, and the things that I'm going to do to prepare for a tournament. Because remember, I'm an average Magic the Gathering player. I'm trying to make it in the competitive scene. I'm trying to document my journey from Timmy to Spike, and I want to share it with you because I wish I had someone that did that with me. Now, if before I get to my 5 biggest lessons learned about the tournament, let's talk about the tournament itself. If you watch the first video in this series, you know that I picked Amalia combo for this Pioneer format RCQ. And that wasn't a bad choice. Talking at a 30,000 foot view, this was a Pioneer 1K tournament, and I cashed. I played for free, got $40, came in 11th, so I missed the top 8. So I was confident in my ability to play Amalia, and I'm still confident in that metagame choice. Everything didn't go right for me. I went 4-2 overall. Let me take you into the matchups themselves. First up, I played against Waste Not. That is supposed to be a bad matchup for me, but I was playing against a pilot that was brand new to the format, and we had a good time, but I ended up taking that win. Second matchup was Rakdos, and this is one I want to spend a little bit of time on because I think this is where the most lessons lie. Rakdos Vampires is supposed to be a favored matchup for me. I have a lot of incidental life gain, and if I play my cards right, even though they can interact with my creatures, I'm constantly threatening a combo. The problem was I didn't play my cards right. I caused a few fumbles to happen that shouldn't have. I was tilted. I was not taking my own lessons or my own advice on how to play through a tournament. And I ended up losing the match against Rakdos, a game that I should have won. That we'll talk about here in a little bit when I tell you my lessons probably derive the most important lessons for me going forward in tournament Magic. So after that Rakdos matchup, I played Mono Black Waste Not again. I think this time I was familiar with it, seeing it in a tournament environment. I built the deck. I hadn't played the deck yet. Game 1, won by turn 4, did my thing. Game 2 was a grind. They ended up sneaking around the corner. They got their Shieldred out and beat me in the end. And then game 3 was another grind, but the tech decisions that I made when I was looking at the metagame put me over the edge and gave me just the advantage I needed to win the game in turn. So I ended up winning that match in turns. Now, round 4, I played a very unique deck, which is not meta at all. You know, it was a homebrew. It was in Azorius Tempo build, using some of the new cards from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. The Tempo archetype is just trying to exchange resources in an advantageous manner for the pilot on every turn. So that's my turn and the way they interact with my spells, and on their turn the way they distribute their resources. So it was a very interesting deck, a lot of flash creatures, a lot of, interrupts, whether it's, actual counters or interrupts via a creature of my own spells, and caused me to be extremely inefficient. And that deck is a foil to my combo. I wasn't expecting to do well, but I did misplay there as well. I could have taken the game a little bit further, and again, those 5 lessons that I have, one of them is from this matchup in particular. Round 5, I played against a Niv Mizzet deck, and Niv Mizzet Reborn is kind of a control-y mid-range strategy, really big creatures, and I got under them both times. Fast aggro, fast combo, that's what I'm supposed to do. So no surprises there. The last matchup was Greasefang. Just comboed them before they could combo me and ended up 4-2. So overall, happy with my record. I did cash, did end up playing for free. It was a $40 cost of entry, won $40 back. So not upset with it, especially for the level of competition that was in the room that day. So let's talk about the 5 key takeaways from these losses, so that you don't have to experience the same thing that I do, whether or not you're playing Pioneer, Standard, Limited, Modern, CEDH. If you're playing Magic, you can take these lessons. So let's go. So my first and probably most important lesson in playing tournament Magic is to play the tournament one step, one turn at a time. One step and one turn at a time. That is because you should just be absolutely present in the moment, very, very thoughtfully considering each of the game actions that you take in every step, in every turn of every game. You can't be thinking about the loss that you just had. You can't be thinking about the misplay you just had, because that's going to make you or cause you to make more errors than you would have otherwise. This lesson number 1 was ingrained in me in that matchup against Rakdos Vampires. So the thing about Amalia combo is that I can constantly pressure the combo. The only thing I have to watch out for against black and red is black and red removal. That is something they're great at. And I was holding this specific play, I'm never going to forget it, is I was holding a return to the ranks in my hand. I had 2 pieces of my combo on the board. I had a 3rd piece of my combo in the graveyard. I had only enough mana to bring 2 pieces of my combo back. And instead of waiting for my next turn when I would have the resources to bring my entire combo back, and I know they're not running any counter spells, they'll have a very hard time dealing with me, I jammed it. And you know what? I identified it in the last part 1 video of this series. Was one of my major threats is counter to the core. Them removing one of my creatures at instant speed that I need in order to combo off. And they did it. And I wasted my return to the ranks, and they ran away with it. It was a pressure. My life total was not threatened to lose on next turn. I very easily could have waited if I was just present and I was thoughtful. And then moving into the next game, I made silly mistakes. Similar misplays where I played spells I probably shouldn't have at inopportune times that presented the opening for them to remove elements that would have otherwise let me run away with the game. So lesson number 1 is play every tournament 1 step, 1 turn at a time. Lesson number 2 is make every land drop intentional. So here's a scenario. I have Amalia Benavides in my hand, a Lunarch Veteran, and a Prosperous Innkeeper. The optimum line is playing a white mana source, turn 1, playing the Lunarch. Turn 2, playing a black mana source and playing the Amalia. Or I said that's the optimal, but that's a line. Now, what if you're in a scenario where you need your Prosperous Innkeeper, which is 1 in a green, to make a treasure token, right? Say they remove your Lunarch Veteran. And this, again, is very specific to Pioneer, very specific to the Amalia combo deck, but the principle applies. What I'm trying to get at is this idea where you need to be thinking almost 2 turns ahead with the sequencing of colors that you have down. You know, a very easy to understand iteration of this lesson is in domain decks, or in Pioneer, it's Niv Mizzet Reborn, where you're playing a lot of triomes and you want to have, say, Leyline Binding available to use at flash speed. Well, you are trying to ensure that by turn 2, you have domain on the board. So you can't just play your tap lands in any sequence. You have to make sure you have the right colors available and the right colors untapped available at the right time. Make every land drop intentional. I would argue that making a land drop is just as important as figuring out what kind of spell you're going to cast on your turn. Lesson number 3 is ask yourself, who is the beatdown? So if you're not familiar with this question, it comes from one of the seminal texts of Magic strategy in theory by a guy named Michael Flores, who interestingly is one of the only players in the Hall of Fame that had never won a Pro Tour. And that's because of his theoretical contributions to advancing the game of Magic. In Who is the Beatdown, Michael Flores talks about essentially the dichotomy that you have in every single match. You have a permissive deck and you have an aggressive deck, okay? And he's not speaking to specific archetypes rather than the role you're playing in the particular game that you have. So mono red isn't always the aggressor, just like Azorius Control isn't always the permissive deck. Now, I'm going to link this article below because it is so important that you read it. Now, in game, when I say you need to ask yourself who is the beatdown, because I would say 2 to 3 really important elements that you need to understand in order to help you understand how to expend your resources in a turn. Because Magic, at the end of the day, is just a limited resources game, right? You have a certain number of lands that tap for mana that you can use to cast spells, right? The less resources that you have, the less spells you can cast, the less you can interact with the board and your opponent, and lower likelihood that that life total or other win condition will get to where you need it to be. When you are assessing who is the beatdown, you are asking yourself, am I supposed to be attacking my opponent's life total right now? Am I supposed to be the beatdown or the aggressor? Or am I backpedaling right now? Am I trying to stabilize the board and interrupt my opponent's lines of play as the permissive deck? So the few elements that you should consider when you're asking yourself that question is, one, archetype absolutely plays a role, right? So if I'm a mono red aggro player, it's pretty safe to assume that at least at the very beginning, you are the aggressor. You're supposed to attack, burn, and try and kill the opponent before he has an opportunity to do what his deck is designed to do. If you are an Azorius control deck, more often than not, at the beginning of a game, you are just trying to stay alive until the late game, until your win conditions come out, right? I think the penultimate test of a pilot's ability to assess who is the beatdown is someone playing a mid-range deck, because a mid-range deck, mid-range as an archetype, is an archetype that can be either more controlling or more aggressive as the particular game requires. And that's what makes those decks so good. It's why some of the best players in the world, like Reed Duke, are notorious for mid-range strategies. People consider Reed Duke the Jund guy in modern, where Jund is a mid-range grind, turn the screws on opponent at the right moment, and then pivot at the right time to win. So asking yourself who is the beatdown, just considering that question, considering archetype, also considering if you're on the play or the draw, and the different advantages that come with being on the play or the draw in your particular matchup. Simply just by asking yourself that question, without even having a full and complete and deep understanding of everything that theory is trying to tell us, is an improvement. I myself asked myself that question before I fully understood what it meant to be the beatdown or to be the permissive, and how that shows up in gameplay. That's okay. Just asking yourself the question is taking a step in that direction. All right, lesson number 4. So hopefully you guys took a minute to read Who is the Beatdown by Michael J. Flores. If you haven't, again, I'm linking that down below. Lesson number 4 is assessing myself as the beatdown or control, and then asking the question, how do I win? Okay, so what does this mean? So when I am, again, ACV MTG is all about talking about Magic theory and strategy and putting it in the context of Pioneer. So assessing how do I win, beatdown or control using Pioneer as a context, I am taking a look at, let's say, Niv Mizzet versus a Gruul aggro deck. Right, Niv Mizzet Reborn, mid-range control strategy, Yorion as a companion, huge 80-card deck versus Gruul aggro featuring the new Slickshot something, show off, right? It's low to the ground, it's fast, it's mean, it's fierce, right? So assessing how, am I the beatdown or the control, and having an answer to how do I win? Okay. So assessing, am I the beatdown or am I the control at this particular moment in the game, and asking myself the question, how do I win? So say I'm the Niv Mizzet pilot. At the beginning stages of the game, more likely than not, I will assess that I am the control. And to answer the question, how do I win? I answer, I have to stay alive until turn 5. So that influences every decision I'm going to make between turns 1 and turns 5, and how I interact with the board state and interact with the opponent. Instead of playing maybe 3 up the beanstalks, I'm holding up mana to play interactive spells like No More Lies or Lightning Helix to help me incrementally gain life, and also stalwart my opponent's efforts to advance their game. Because once I get to 4 or 5, we'll get into a concept maybe in a later video. But as a Niv Mizzet deck, I have the inevitability that if the game were to go on an infinite time horizon, my deck will always win. And that's mid-range control. That's an assessment. That's, that goes into understanding your archetype. And if any of those videos would add value to you, or talking about those concepts at a deeper level, just let me know in the comments, and I'm here for you guys. I'm learning like you're learning, and I just want to be a resource. So just let me know down below. Guys, before I get into this last lesson that I took away from losing at my RCQ, I just want to ask, if this video gives you any value whatsoever, please like, please subscribe, please comment, tell me what you liked or what you didn't like, and please share with your Magic friends. Again, the format doesn't matter. You guys could just be a pod of Commander players that just love playing casually together. It's about improving. It's about taking this game that we love and understanding it at a deeper level so that we can maximize how we experience the game. So again, please like, subscribe, share. It means the world to me that you even watched it this long. And let's get to the last lesson. Lesson number 5 that I took away from this RCQ loss was to cast every piece of interaction with intentionality. Whereas in lesson number 4, I asked the question, how do I win? I would say casting your interaction with intentionality is more of asking yourself the question, how do I lose? And interacting with the board state and your opponent accordingly. So say you have a massive board state. You have creatures, you're beating them down. You're like, I'm the aggressor. I'm supposed to turn my creatures sideways, go, go, go. And you assess the clock and you realize you have a 3-turn clock and maybe they have a 3.5-turn clock. And you ask yourself the question, how do I lose? I lose, well, maybe by losing 1 or 2 more creatures. I no longer have the incremental advantage. And my opponent builds his board state to a state where they can turn that 2.5-3-turn clock into a 0-turn clock next turn. So you have to take a look at your hand, you have to take a look at your available resources, and you have to cast them accordingly. Now, that's super abstract, and I feel like I have a tendency to talk that way. Again, if you're confused about anything, just ask the question in the comments. I'm glad to help out. But I guess in this instance, what I'm talking to is, say you have a 3/2 creature and a 1/1 creature, and they have a 4/4, right? And their life total is at 4, and say your life total is at 6. Okay? If you attack with both creatures right now, he will kill one of them. And then all he has to do is, or she, all opponent has to do is put 2 more damage down on the board or against you in any way, and you lose. So whereas you think that you're in a position that you're supposed to be just attacking, maybe you should hold back a combat step until you have an overwhelming force or a spell that will put you over the edge no matter what, rather than, stealing defeat from the jaws of victory. So those are my 5 lessons that I took away from losing at this last RCQ. So hopefully you don't have to go through that. And let me know what you guys took away from this. If you apply it at a local game store or at a tournament yourself, I'd love to hear it. Drop it in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video.